This Resident Evil 2 remake gave me the opportunity to play through one of the more popular entries in Capcom's Resident Evil franchise. Since my introduction to the series began with Resident Evil 4, I have been very vocal over the last number of years in stating that I find the first number of entries damn near unplayable, having literally the worst control and camera angle combinations that I've ever experienced in any video game. But with all these improvements being added to this remake, that not only immediately made this game my most anticipated game of 2019, but it really had the potential to dethroning Resident Evil 4 as my new favorite entry in the franchise. Unfortunately, while my closing thoughts of this game were rather positive after I'd beaten it, that didn't stop me from being reminded of just how frustrating this game was at times, and with all of the lost opportunities that this game let pass by, which in my eyes prevent this game from being the true masterpiece that I thought it could be. Now, the story for this version of Resident Evil 2 plays out for the most part similar to the original 1998 telling. The game follows our two main protagonists, Leon S. Kennedy and Claire Redfield. Leon is on his way to Raccoon City to start his first day as a police officer, and Claire at the same time is on her way to Raccoon City to find her brother Chris Redfield, who is a member of the special unit called STARS. The two manage to escape a small group of zombies at first, and then are separated. And from that point on, Leon and Claire go down somewhat similar paths throughout the story, and unfortunately, this is where the first main issue that I had with this game starts. Now, depending on what order you play Leon and Claire's campaign, for the most part, certain events will play out the same with only a few differences. The biggest problem that this version of the Resident Evil 2 storyline has is that, for the most part, it completely ignores the second character. Now, please allow me to explain. In the original game, regardless of what character you played as first, there were several scenes throughout the game that had Leon and Claire either in communication with each other with the use of radios, or were actually meeting each other in person. This gave you the impression that both of these characters were in the same area and were actively working together in order to progress forward. This is not at all how things work in this remake. Regardless of who you play as first, there are only 3 interactions between these two characters throughout the entire game. The first is at the gas station, the second happens moments after you've entered the police station, and the third happens at the very end of the game. This was a really bad way to tell this story because it causes a number of inconsistencies and plot problems that are never explained. If you play the Leon A campaign first, there are a number of key encounters that take place that actively affect certain areas, but if you follow this up by playing the Claire B campaign, there is no indication that Leon had ever been there. Here's another example that could be considered a big spoiler. Now, in Leon's A campaign, the final boss is a mutated version of the Tyrant, but if you play the Claire B campaign, which is supposed to be taking place either around or during the same time as Leon's A campaign, the Tyrant creature is openly killed by William Burkham. Now, if this is the case, how on earth could the Tyrant creature still be alive to fight Leon at the end? Now, some might argue that there may have been a second Tyrant creature, but the plot never states this or has any evidence to back this up, and all versions of Leon and Claire's campaign makes this mistake. There was only one section in this entire game in which there was any evidence of the second character, and this was in the kennel room of the police department. In my first playthrough as Leon, the room had a number of dogs, but if you go through this section with Claire, the dogs are already dead, and it was this kind of attention to detail that I really wish that this game's story had paid more attention to. This kind of a mistake of ignoring the other protagonists is something that not even Resident Evils 4, 5, and 6 made, as those games did a wonderful job showing the same events from different points of views that explained what one character was doing at the same time as another. And when you consider how short the game's plot for Resident Evil 2 really is, then this can come off really disappointing, at least when compared to the original telling of the story. Now, when it comes to the overall gameplay elements of this Resident Evil 2 remake has, overall, then I would say in a whole it is wonderful. However, there is a serious pacing issue that is just way too big for me to ignore, which is why I wish to get it out of the way first. Now, I don't care if you folks give me a thumbs down or call me a loser in the comment section for what I'm about to say, because I personally don't give a damn. I absolutely hated the entire first third of this game. The entire section of time in which I spent in the Raccoon City police station for both Leon and Claire's campaign is by far the worst section of a Resident Evil game that I have ever experienced in 15 years since I was first introduced to the Resident Evil franchise back in 2004. This entire section is nothing but one giant confusing maze full of nothing but fetch quests that had me going back and forth countless times and had me running out of ammo so quickly, and when you throw in the element of having Trenchy walking around forcing me to stop everything I am doing just to lead him away so I could try and figure out where to go next. And while I'll admit that having him walking around and being able to hear his footsteps throughout the area did add a certain level of suspense, that in no case stopped it from being any less annoying. I ended up dying more than 20 times in this one section alone, which is officially more times than my first playthroughs of Resident Evil's 4, 5, 6, Revelations 1, and Revelations 2 combined, and this was on standard difficulty. Things got so bad that I was very close to quitting, and during my first playthrough as Leon, I spent well over 3 hours just trying to figure out where to go and what to do next. And the only way that I was even ever able to get past this section was to do something that I have never done in any Resident Evil game before, and that was to literally have an entire walkthrough of the game running on my computer screen while I followed along. And it wasn't until after I got out of the police station's garage and officially made my way to the second part of this game, in which it was the sewers, that this game made a complete 180 and became exactly everything that I wanted this game to be from the very beginning. Now, the gameplay style this time around goes away from the locked camera and tank controls of the original and more resembles the style of gameplay that was used in Resident Evil 6 and Revelations 2 by having the camera being behind the character and giving you the capability of being able to fire your weapon and move at the same time. Now, if you happen to play this game on the PlayStation 4, a really awesome game mechanic that was added was that the speaker on the PlayStation 4 controller is used multiple times throughout the game for a multitude of uses, and the color on the front of the control reveals the state of health that your character is in, which is something I really wish more games would take advantage of. Now, for the older fans who missed the much more survival horror aspect of the older games and want to move away from the more action-focused feeling of some of the more recent entries, not including Resident Evil 7, then you will feel right at home here. Enemies are scattered throughout the game. However, compared to the original game, the enemy variety has been greatly decreased, and though there are a few real boss fights spread throughout the campaign, like the enemies, I wish that they had had more variety. There is also a serious need to be very careful with the amount of ammo that one has, as there is not enough ammo spread throughout the game to kill every enemy in the game, and it is equally important to manage one's inventory and be mindful of the amount of resources that you have, as that is very key to surviving in some of the more challenging sections later on in the game. There's also a solid collection of weapons spread throughout the game, with a majority of them having attachments that can be applied to them to enhance their performance. There is also a solid collection of characters, as during Leon's campaign there is a small section in which you can play as Ada Wong, and during Claire's campaign there's a section that allows you to play as Sherry. After finishing the two main campaigns, you can even try some of the extra modes that will allow you to play as the mysterious Hunk as he attempts to escape Raccoon City before it's destroyed, and the hilarious Tofu survivor horror mode for some really nice laughs. Now, visually, this game is absolutely stunning to look at. Though I never gave Resident Evil 7 a real chance to play, I really appreciate Capcom's decision to actually use the Resident Evil 7 engine, as visually these characters look better than they ever have in any other installment, and the attention to detail for not just the environment, but the amount and kind of damage that you inflict on an opposing enemy has become a new requirement for me when it comes to all the future Resident Evil games that will come out after this installment. The soundtrack is also very well handled, fitting perfectly with the different types of environments that one will explore throughout the game, and there's even a really cool option that will allow you to actually have the original soundtrack play in the background. I encountered no technical issues of any kind, which made this remake a very smooth experience once I got past a certain point in the game. And in my personal opinion, this game would serve as a good jumping on point for anyone who is new to the franchise, and I believe that it does a really good job, or it does the best job that it could have done in creating a bridge between the older fans and fans like me who are not too fond of some of those older games. But now playing this in the form that it is currently in certainly made it an interesting experience, even though there were some serious frustrations along the way. Now, I'm sure by now that some of you out there are a little bit upset from the personal criticisms that I have toward this game, because just from looking at the reception that this game has been getting online from just about every game review source that I could find, this game is getting critical acclaim across the board. But sadly, I just don't feel like I can jump in that camp. Now, from the moment I first saw gameplay of this game at E3, this immediately became my most anticipated game of 2019. So I was going to judge this game harder than any game that I plan to play this year. And when you take into effect that this game is initially a remake of a game that I have openly stated for many years that I do not like, not being a fan of any of those original Resident Evil games that came before Resident Evil 4, I would say that it was a pretty incredible achievement for what Capcom was able to do. I even went so far as to say that this game had the potential to even dethrone my favorite entry and one of my all-time favorite games of all time, that being Resident Evil 4. But sadly, it just doesn't compare to Resident Evil 4, which is still so much better in my opinion. And having the problems of having, without question, the most frustrating first third of this game being so bad that I initially had to just watch an entire walkthrough online just to complete it. And then once I was past that point, it then became the game that I always wanted this game to be. And then when you take into effect that there is some lacking of enemy variety and there are some serious flaws of how the story is told, despite all those problems, I would still consider this a great game and a must-buy for anyone who's a fan of Resident Evil. Now, again, this is not perfect, and if you do enjoy this a lot more than me, I perfectly understand. But I will also give this game a lot of credit for being able to do things and incorporate elements that I wasn't expecting, because, again, I don't like the original games, and it made this very much playable, and it even incorporates some gameplay aspects that even some hardcore PlayStation exclusive titles don't even do, which in my book gives it some serious credit. And when you also take into effect that Capcom recently made an announcement stating that they would be releasing some free DLC content that was going to give us 3 extra campaigns allowing us to play some extra characters, that really shows you that Capcom put a lot of love and dedication to give us the best game that they could possibly give us. And there's even some rumors online that they might try to go into Resident Evil 3, which at this point I'm a little bit on the fence about. But I still think that this was an amazing achievement. Now, before doing this review, I was going to give this game a 7.5, but with these recent announcements and these inclusions of these extra gameplay elements that I wasn't expecting, I'm going to have to bump my personal rating of Resident Evil 2 Remake to an 8.0. Again, I still think this is a great game, but just compared to other games as a whole, I did have more fun playing those games than this game in its entirety. But again, those are just my thoughts. Now, if you happen to play Resident Evil 2 Remake, share your thoughts with me and everyone else in the comments down below. And if you like this video, don't forget to press like and subscribe, and don't forget to press that bell down below to keep me notified. And also, if you have any more requests for other future video game topic videos, be sure to share those with me on my Twitter feed. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I'll see you next time.